All right, I think we can start. So, hello everyone. I'm your host, Anthony Yang, a Regional Development Minister for AYLUS and a sophomore at Watchung Hills Regional High School. AYLUS stands for the Alliance of Youth Leaders in the United States, and we are a student-run nonprofit organization dedicated to the advancement of our communities, which range from our own houses to all across the United States. If you're interested in joining, feel free to check out the AYLUS website that I'll post in the chat. Today, we are with our speaker, Ms. Wang, who has over 20 years of experience in the global pharmaceutical industry. She is currently a senior clinical development development director at Novartis Pharmaceuticals, leading phase 2 and 3 of clinical strategy in areas of heart failure, hypertension, and rare renal diseases. She was a key contributor to the successful Entresto submission and market authorization. Wenyan completed her postdoctoral training in heart development at Columbia University, and she received her PhD in biochemistry from Iowa State University. Today, Ms. Wang will be giving us a basic overview of what to expect in the pharmaceutical industry and how to get into it. If you ever have a question, feel free to type it in the chat or use the raise hand feature. We hope we can help everyone here deepen their understanding of the pharmaceutical industry. And now I think let's get started.
Thank you, Anthony, for your nice introduction, and nice to meet everyone.
Okay, so Ms. Wang, could you please give us a brief intro of your life journey?
Sure. I went to college to major in biochemistry many years ago, and after that, I pursued a master's degree in bioengineering in China, and then I came to the US to get my PhD degree again in biochemistry and molecular biology. And after that, I did a brief postdoc at Columbia University on heart disease and molecular mechanism behind that. And then I joined industry, starting from the research part, and then moved into develop compounds into medicine in the development part. So I worked in 3 companies. Schering-Plough is a US company, and then I merged with Merck, and then I joined a European company. It's a global company, but the headquarters is in Basel, Switzerland. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really nice. Okay, so could you tell us, like, why did you get into biochemical research?
It's actually, the decision was made when I was 18, about your age. I was in high school, so back then we didn't have internet, so we all tried to hear different things from maybe classmates, brothers, sisters, or some alumni coming back to the school. So I first thought about the 21st century would be the century for biotechnology and genetics, so I applied for genetics. And then I heard people recommending biochemistry is better because then it studies all these phenomena and mechanism on the molecular level, which is very fascinating to me. So I chose biochemistry.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. Okay, so could you tell us, like, what it's like to work in a research lab for biochemistry or biology?
Mm-hmm. So I spent many years in biochemical research. So starting from the graduate school, I spent 3 + 5, so to get my degree. So that's already 8 years. And then I did another year of postdoc. So 9, 10 years, a good part of my life before I turned 30. I never worked in a real job. It's always like training after training after training. So the working in the research lab is that you first have to have a topic, something you feel, a question that you're curious, wants to know, and you choose a lab, and then you choose, the mentor. So you may select a few labs and see which one is the best fit and the topic that's of a great interest and you're capable of doing. And then I would say it's research is not a 9-to-5 job. It's almost like whenever I was awake, I always think about, the things that didn't work out. Most of the time, I would say 80-90% of the time, things do not work. So it's you need to have that kind of tenacity or persistence and trying to really want to find out. Otherwise, you got, you know, a very bumpy road. So I spend a lot of hours, like over 10, 12 hours a day in the lab, doing wet chemistry, you know, working with cells, working with proteins, working with instruments, designing experiments like that.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned that you spent most of like the first 30 years of your life like focusing on education. So like what's your opinion on focusing on your academic career and receiving like an advanced education versus going into like the workforce right away?
I think my experience may not be very typical. So back then I was in China, and then, you know, this early days when China is really did not have a good establishment of industry. I think in US, if I were growing up right now, I may consider going to a workplace just to get a sense about, like the question you asked me, what it's like to work in a real research lab in the industry, and then figure out what kind of functions like the industry would have and what's the best fit for my interest. I think that will give me maybe a better sense about what my passion is really about, because then I kept on going because part of that is because of limited opportunities. And also I wanted to do, you know, research. So, and then I wanted to run programs. I want to, you know, have my own topics and, you know, doing my own research. So that in that sense, I need to get a better, a more advanced education.
I see. Okay. So, what kind of advanced degree do people usually have in like a research institution? And like what type of degree like does someone need to get into that type of research institution?
So it's a mixture. So most of the labs will be like a research lab usually headed by a professor. And under the professor, there will be some postdoctoral training, trainees, like postdoctoral fellowships, the fellows who have completed their PhD education and started getting into having their own programs or exploring new programs. So they are under the professor. Sometimes it's like a collaborating effort, so to prepare them for the future professorship or a job in a company. And also usually a lab has some PhD students and also master degree students. And a lot of times they're undergraduate students as well. So if people, if you're interested in getting into these kind of, I would say STEM type of career, I would highly recommend you to use these resources in whichever school you have. Try to get contact with the professors early on. Try to get it started early on so that you're gonna have the first-hand experience in the lab and understand what research is all about. I mean, for me, even though with the limited opportunities back then in China, I started research when I was a sophomore. So I went to the different labs and tried to volunteer. Of course, it's not paid, but I get a sense about, you know, what people do in the lab and how I can help. So I started from going to the libraries and making the cards, like trying to get abstracts. Back then there's, you know, no computer basically. So everything like I took the cards and tried to write the abstracts and support the research, write some summaries. But anything you can do to start early, like whichever field, I think that's like all the STEM fields probably would apply.
Yeah. So, like currently, like in your job, like, could you give us like the basics on what you do it for? Like, what is like the goal right now, like the end goal?
As I work in the pharmaceutical company, so the end goal is to help people with their, you know, with their disease and try to cure the disease or control their conditions. So in each company, we have different disease areas to focus on. For example, Novartis, I work in cardiovascular and renal and metabolic disease. So I worked on heart failure. I used to work on cholesterol lowering drugs. And then we also look at kidney disease. And then some of these are really in very few patients would have that, a rare disease. So we're trying to understand these mechanisms and trying to identify the right targets to develop the medicine so that we can, help these patients.
Yeah. So, what do you think about the changes in your career?
So for me, I think the main theme really didn't change much. So I started with biochemistry. So it's like understanding mechanisms on the molecular level. So throughout my career, I worked on disease, and sometimes I work on even like the disease in the plants, or I used the bacteria or fungi or insect cells to answer some of the questions, including human cell lines. I think the change would be in my earlier career, I focused on development, which means to understand the mechanism of action for the compound or mechanism for the disease, so that we can identify which protein or which part of the cells would be the target, so that we can develop some drug to interfere. So that's my, before I would say maybe 12 some years ago. And then I moved to clinical part, which means there's a compound that has been elucidated, or the mechanism of action. They know why this compound is working on which pathway. For example, if it's working on certain targets, like in a cure hypertension, and then we need to get that into the animals to test whether this is safe, and then to the healthy volunteers in human to see whether that's safe. And then we go to the disease population to see whether it's not only safe, but effective. It can be a therapeutic agent. So I now work on the later part, like whether it will work in the disease population. So there's a change between, that molecular level versus now working in the real patient population.
I see. Yeah. So, like, what kind of characteristics is the pharmaceutical industry looking for?
So pharmaceutical industry is huge, right? For Novartis, you can think about it, it's about, I would say 100,000 employees. And you wrap your mind around that, is like, how can that be? You need so many people. Because if you think about a company, you can divide it into three major sections. One is the research part, which I did before. And then there's a development part, which means we're trying to get one compounds, try that, test that in the disease population to understand whether it's efficacious. And then there's another one is a commercial part, which means like you bring this to the market, to the hospital, to the patients. And then if you look at the other, like underneath that, the supporting structure, there are more functions. Like people are working with health authorities, that's regulatory, and people who are very good at math, like mathematicians and statisticians. So they work on, building models, trying to understand how to answer certain questions. And we have people like lawyers who's like working on protecting, the IP status for, the company's discoveries. And also we have a big chunk of business people who are developing collaborations and negotiating with other companies, trying to establish, we call the, they can purchase other companies' stuff, and they can sell. Sometimes we get rid of some compounds. We don't want to develop, it's not our focus, we give other people. And we also have quite a number of people working on data science. So they acquire a lot of data, they do analysis, and they try to incorporate it more and more digital stuff into our R&D and commercial. So it's a very complex organization, but I think the character that gonna make anyone a successful employee, a contributor in the company, is your curiosity and your ability to communicate and work with other people, and also the ability to sustain any frustrations, or can overcome difficulties and can think out of the box. And then I think most importantly, probably just you actually enjoy that part. I think that because it's a decades-long effort, it's very hard to do something just for making money. I'm truly believer of that. I think you need to love, or to a certain degree. Yeah, it may not be your hobby, but you love this and you find a lot of meanings in what you do. For me, I really enjoy what I do, because when I think about, this compound gonna help the disease, the people who are suffering from that, especially the ones like a rare disease, and people don't usually have much opportunities to get research done on that. And a lot of these are really happening, like a genetic disease happening in childhood. I think this is very meaningful. So when I get up in the morning and get to work, I feel it's a very meaningful job, and I really get encouraged, from these day-to-day work.
Yeah, I think that's great. So could you also like you mentioned rare diseases and like research into that rare disease. Could you give us like any details on like the process of investigating those diseases?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So some of the disease, I think more and more, because of the regulatory agencies like FDA or EMA, the regulatory body for the European drug approval, they have more and more policies to encourage companies to make these discoveries. They give more like a patent protections, all that. I think more and more, and also advances of using different ways to measure the success for drug approval. So more companies are getting involved into these rare disease. For example, one of the rare disease I'm working on is for kids with kidney function, impaired kidney function. So they may have blood in the urine, and they feel tired all the time. And then they may lose their kidney function at a very young age. So they have to go to dialysis, basically as if like you do not have kidneys, and they either have to receive kidney transplant, and that sometimes also fail, or they have to be put on dialysis, which means like you hook up with the dialysis instrument and doing that 3 times a week. Every time it's going to be 2 hours. So it's really a big burden, and it's very hard to see the young people getting into a life like that at a very young age. I think that's very motivating, especially when I go to these patient-facing meetings, to hear firsthand how the parents and then the patients, hope to find new treatment for that. So for that, we need to understand there are many pathways involved. So one of the pathways is we're working on. So we're testing this like one step after step, in the animals, and then in healthy human beings, and then in adults, and eventually we're gonna move to kids.
I see. Yeah. So like those steps are like really important. So maybe could you describe like the animal step maybe like in more detail?
I personally do not work on that. We call it like usually for a disease, some scientists in the lab will build disease models. So these models would be they do genetic modifying these animals, usually like a mouse, rats, can be guinea pigs, or can be even dogs, or sometimes for more advanced disease like viral disease, we may even use monkeys to answer those questions. So these questions, we need to have the model, and then we can put the compounds in these models to see whether that pathway is blocked or whether it's working. They can help answer certain questions. Not 100% transferable. Sometimes the animals can be all right, and in human, we still find issues, or sometimes the other way around. So we have a big. These are really divided in finer sectors in the pharmaceutical industry. Like people working toxicology are different people from the people who are working in real patients. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like, what does success look like in your position, and like, how do you define that success?
I think in the pharmaceutical industry, every program now is very big matrix. So you heard early on, I explained there's a lot of functions. Like all these functions, almost everybody is involved in this. We need to build the strategy before we even start doing this research. We need to understand what's the medical needs and what we can do, what is the resources that we have, and what's the commitment we have, and what's the competitive landscape it is like. So there's almost all the functions involved in that. So the success would be the close communication, close alignment with all these functions. And then there's a key functions, like clinical development is really the key driver for the success. So we are like in the core interacting with a lot of other functions. So we need to stay curious and stay critical. So don't get complacent. So always ask questions. Is this the right way to do? And also another thing, because there's a lot of money involved in developing a medicine, these days it can easily go to like $5 million, even more. So the last trial I did, it's close to 400 million. So the current one is over 200 million. So it's a lot of money companies putting on these trials. We need to make sure we have asked all the questions that we can think of. Another key element is the communication, because we also interface with a lot of world-renowned key opinion leaders. These are the doctors who's deciding the treatment guidelines. So we need to get their input for our strategies, and we need to explain well why we're designing certain ways, because we not always agree with each other. And we have a different, for a company, we want to bring compounds to the market. And for the KOLs, they may have additional interest. They have interest in scientific discovery. Even if it fails, it may answer some questions. So there's a balance between the two. So for people like in my position, I would be interfacing with them a lot. So I need to explain and then also keep very good, productive relationship with them. I don't want to, piss them off, then they don't want to work with us. Meanwhile, we also want to sometimes be firm about, there's certain things we cannot do. We just say we don't want to do this. We don't have money. We don't, explain that. So we have this mutual respect and a collaborative team on this.
Okay, yeah. So could you tell us how you overcame a challenging situation in your work career?
Of course, I have a lot of challenges. I'm trying to think in my early career, right? In my right after my college, I was debating whether I should get higher education or I should get a job, and maybe I change my career a little bit. Maybe I want to go to law, or I had all those doubts also. I think the challenge is to, sometimes making that decision, knowing that will impact me in the long run. So what I like to do is I like to talk to people. So I usually reach out to people who are older than me, or they have been through this, they had made their choices, and not only the people who are surrounding you, and ideally would be someone really in the other sectors, so that you know this is the world, the comfortable zone that you are in. You're seeing them day in, day out, but this may not be the best for yourself. You need to know a bit more like what's out there. So I did speak to people who actually moved to business, and I figured out I probably do not like the kind of lifestyle that they have. You know, they travel a lot, they sell different compound, you know, medicine, they talk to, you know, different doctors and different hospitals. I just can't see myself doing that. And then I at one point I thought about going into law, and I debated about it, and then I talked to people actually made that move. And I figured I did not quite like that either. So I think it's just like in science, there are so many different ways after the college. It's not like that defines what you're gonna do. It's a lot of things change after that. It's a lot of branches you can go to, and it's better to have that mindset while you're in college, trying to figure out, trying to have more exposure to other options, so that to figure out what is the best for your personality and for your curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah. So we actually have a question from Michelle. So her question is, what made you change from basic research to clinical trials?
That's a good question. Actually, this is like serendipity. I mean, for me, because that's in 2007, my company bought another company in Boston. And in order to assimilate that company into our big pharma culture, so our big pharma decided to move some people over there so that we change their culture. So my department was asked to go there. So everybody basically offered a job to just move over there. So I went there twice, even looked for houses, and decided it's not for me. So I just rejected that job, which means I have to find a job. And then I thought, well, you know, I've been doing research for 10 plus years. I always curious about how the discovery in the early stage would move into the late stage, how that becomes a drug. I think I was curious about that. So I started talking to people in that sector. And then I, you know, made that change. Because of that, it's simple, but it's also because of the situation change.
Okay, that's nice. So a big question here is, what specific majors should students focus on to have a successful career in the pharmaceutical industry?
I think the pharmaceutical industry have many aspects. Of course, when people think about it, you think about MDs. Yeah, MDs is a very small percentage in my company. I would say maybe 5%. Even in my department, we have MDs, PhDs, PharmDs, we have nurses. We even have people like from a little bit like biological science, but with master degrees, you know, that kind. And also we have an operations side that were people from all kinds of scientific background, but mostly biology. I think so I can focus on what I know, like biological science. So most of these majors would be considered like a pre-med in US system, college. So you can do research if you're really interested in a very analytical mind, you have analytical mind, you want to answer questions, you want to dig out the mechanism behind a phenomenon or some pathway. So that would be like scientific training. So that would most likely require at least a master, and then you may want to go to PhD. But if you want to go to medical, to understand disease and treatment, then you go to MD. But that's not all. But you can go to other things. Like some people go to epidemiology, Some people after that, maybe in college, you like math, you can do biology and math and then go to stats or go to modeling, and you can combine with the computer science and data science to do that. Or you can go to like a PharmD, and then we have a lot of PharmDs. PharmD, they can go to like a regulatory department, so they interface with health authorities, discussing with them, you know, what we want this, we think we have achieved this, we want, we think this compound is going to help this kind of patients, what do you think we should do, and this is our proposal. So they are the key department facing the health authorities. And we also have a law department. It's like anything we go to publication, any relationship we establish with the outside KOLs needs to go through law. So overall, I think it's, once you go into science, you need to like figure out what is your strength and what you actually enjoy doing. I think that's very important, because I haven't really seen someone who's miserable at one place and stayed there for a long time. Usually people change, and sometimes people make very drastic change because they do not like their you know, major, that type of work. And also the team, you know, I think teamwork is very important in a pharmaceutical company.
Yeah, so actually back to Michelle's question, which one do you like better, basic research or clinical trials?
That's a good question. I think while I was doing research, I loved that, but after a while, you know, it's getting to, I got, you know, this is my personality. I think I got very familiar with the type of work I was doing, and the time I left, I had 3 programs in my hands, and then I enjoy the scientific stimulation, and I like to go to meetings and discuss with scientists about that. When I changed to clinical, I think that type of a scientific stimulation is much lower, I have to say. And the chance to publish anything is much lower because it's a very different structure. I think what I like the most for research is the excitement. And what I like the clinical research is this collaboration, also the job flexibility. I mean, I literally can take care of something during the day. If my child is sick or something, I can come back at night because almost all the work is done on the computer. And then there's a lot of meetings. So very different type of work. I think I read more papers when I was doing research because it's cutting edge. We constantly keep an eye on anything that pop up from the field, and we know who's doing what. We know which company is doing what research and which academic lab is leading certain things. So that's a very tense, very time consuming. So it demands a lot of energy, I have to say. Clinical research is it's a bit slower because you're dealing with real patients. They don't pop up right away. You have to enroll them one after another, and many of these trials takes months and years. So you really have that breathing time. Very few things are that urgent, except when you're dealing with the health authorities. So if you like flexibility, clinical is much better. And also in terms of concentration of advanced degrees, I think the research is very concentrated with PhDs. So getting advancement in career, you need a combination of your talent and the right management, and you being recognized and position yourself in a way, and you have to be on the right project. So there's a lot of things combined. I think in clinical research is relatively easier to get career advancement. It's opened up more opportunities. I mean, at least that's for me.
Yeah, so we also have another question from Alyssa. So her question is, what is the difference between the biology major and pharmacy major?
The biology major, I think, is more like a basic science type. right? So you still go there, you learn mainly chemistry and biology. And so it's about pathways, it's about different molecules, about DNA, RNA, protein, some technologies. Pharmacy is a bit different. Pharmacy, they go to pharmacy school, they still learn some of these mechanisms and all that, but they focus on different groups of compounds. Like hypertensions, there are different groups like diuretics, there are some different compounds. So they learn the mechanism, how these compounds work. So a lot of memorization. So if you have to like that. So some people, because it's 5 years, because the big chunk of knowledge in there. So you need to first learn them one after another, and then in your mind, after you accumulate enough knowledge, you probably can, have a better understanding overall, like everything else. But in pharmacy, is even more so. Depend on whether you like that type of training. And people after that, sometimes they go to pharmacy, as the major pharmacist, or they can go to the industry, doing some work, not completely under pharmacy. Like when they are in regulatory, they need some knowledge, but not all the knowledge. I think the thing is, whenever we think about the knowledge we learn in college, I think it's very hard to say how much you're going to carry over to your job. It's really the soft skills that you carry with you. And then I think with the change right now is even more rapid than when I was, starting in my past, few decades. I think right now is even more so. It's just an example. When I moved from research to development, I got a comment from one of the VP said, I know you have been in a company for so long, but I don't need to read your CV because I know you have no training in my field. It's a 0. So, what I'm looking at is how it's all these soft skills, how you do the teamwork, how you arrange or manage the other programs in the other field. And your ability to learn and your passion for, your willingness to take this very steep hurdle to pick up your speed and then get familiar with the field. So I think for everything, like the major you choose, you always pay attention to your soft skills.
Yeah, so like you mentioned teamwork, and like I like to ask, like, how important is that teamwork in your type of industry?
Very, very close. So for example, right now I'm running a cross-functional team platform, which it involves research, development, commercial. Also, we call global medical affairs, who these are MDs or PhDs, whoever these are professionals going to hospitals, talking to physicians directly. Also, we in the team, we have regulatory people, we have statisticians, everybody bring in their strengths, and they all look at one question or this program from very different angle. So all the questions can be very valid. Like from my training, I probably wouldn't think of something like a statistician would ask some question. So it's enlightening and humbling to learn that and to understand each other's concerns. And only with that, we can build a program as holistic as possible, so that we can, I think a lot of these programs, we have a lot of failed programs, which means that the program, after you spend all the money, all the time, and the patients in it, we couldn't answer the question. That's the worst type of trial you can run. To avoid that, sometimes it's an error we cannot avoid, and because of knowledge gap, but we try to minimize that. To minimize that, we need input from a lot of functions, including even like the feasibility of the trial, whether this is doable. You have great ideas, but you're dealing with human beings, things like that. So I think teamwork, it's so critical. Like every day we have meetings with different teams, different functions to discuss different topics. And that's ongoing throughout the whole, program for all the programs.
Yeah. So, could you also describe a successful work project and how you achieved like that success?
So this will be later in a career, right? I would say, so because our company are divided into different organizations, sometimes it's very subtle, like collaboration between organizations. So as you can understand, like everyone would like to be recognized for their success. So they carry certain program to a certain level, and then they pass this ball to the next organization. So we are at the next relay, system. We take that program. But then in order to make this transition very seamless, we need to establish the good working relationship. So that's a cross-organizational interaction. Is built upon this trust. And also we are not only give advice, and we are considerate about their concerns. So I think it's end up to be teamwork and the willingness to, to think in other people's opinion as well. You think for your own, like, oh, once it gets to me, it needs to be in this kind of shape. Otherwise, I may fail. And you need to do this and do that, because then I don't think you did it right. That type of thinking needs to be, tweak a little bit. And when you want to pass that message, you need to think about, in their view, why they're doing that and how you can pass your message so that they feel they're going to benefit from that. So I think it's all boils down to that can be practiced even when you're at home, working with your colleagues, with your peers in school on projects, how to negotiate, how to who's doing what. How do you do this, collaboration so that, the program, everyone wins. And you also need to understand what's in there for others, not just for you. You care about something, but others may not care. So you need to find out that to make the communication work.
Yeah. So basically, like openness to other people's opinions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, I think that's good. So like now that we finished, hopefully you all have learned something about the pharmaceutical industry. So we'll now open up to you guys for any questions you'd like to ask regarding this topic. So please type your question in the chat or use the raise hand feature if you want to talk personally. If there are no questions, we can end it early, but I'll give like maybe 2 or 3 minutes just for people to maybe come up with questions and then type it in the chat.
So while we're waiting, I think maybe I want to share something I think is always important throughout my life, which I kind of wished I had realized that much earlier. Is I think it's always nice if you can find a mentor, someone you respect, and you feel that person is truly interested in, investing in young people, or, maybe particularly you for whatever reason, and maybe it feels like that you have this passion to continue in this career. It's always nice to use that resources, whichever school you go to, because it's always there. If you, it's going to college is not about just going to classes and getting a bunch of A's. So eventually you need to go to the workforce, and then you need to understand the dynamics. Once you're at work, people will treat you as an adult. So the way how you carry yourself, how you want to contribute to the team, want to speak up, and how you get along with your manager. I think all these can be practiced, like even in your house, like with your parents and then with your teachers. Sometimes, when we were young, when I was young, I feel I was lacking that training. Sometimes I feel like the idea I didn't like, I just like, that doesn't make sense. I don't want to do that. I could have done much better, and then probably my life would be much easier, more harmonious if I had that wisdom. And then I didn't have, I have my mentors, like my PhD or master advisors, but thinking back, I think I would benefit more if I have more senior people to talk to, have more these kind of conversations and find out more about other, possibilities. So I spent way too much time doing my own reading, just like doing study. I feel like that part could have been approved more. So I really recommend, you learn from my mistake.
Yeah. So could you actually like tell us about the like about a mentor maybe that you had in your life that gave you some good advice that you like to pass on to everyone else here?
Yeah, I want to give you one example. So I went to school when I was in PhD, right? I was looking for postdoc, and I was not so good at presentation. I always get very nervous, and then naturally I speak very fast, to an extent where my American classmates, one of the comment I got is like, she spoke so fast as if she memorized every word, and she just like dumping that without seeing people understand or not. It's just like, and that's something I didn't realize because that's lack of training. I think because like in US, people have a lot of chance to do the presentations. I think you can polish that. Another one is before I went to my postdoc training, I actually went to a woman professor, which in my department is almost all men, very few women back then. So I went to her and asked her what I should, I going to the New York City. I have been living in Iowa, so it's countryside. We really didn't pay much attention to, how to carry ourselves, whether it's very casual. So she gave me very good advice, not only like what to wear, but also about, how to arrange the slides. And and then she gave me advice saying, you should be able to, you are the expert. You should be able to know your stuff better than anyone else. And you should be able to give a presentation if the lights or electricity went out. You can just stand there, just give that. And that really hit me. Like, it's just, I remembered that from then on. Not only I have better arranged my slides, how to do that. Also, I think I want to make it more like a storyline. So people are not gonna doze off. It's not about you want to dump these data to people. It's more about lead people through the stories, why you're interested in this, right? Why now you're interested in this? Why you're answering this question? I think that we all naturally think that way, but when we put in presentations, because nervousness, whatever, like very tense, we always feel like we're not doing our job. So we may just run through slides nervously, and then it's the effect afterwards. People usually don't remember more than 3 facts. If you think about that. So you need to make it more like a story. If you can talk to your parents or talk to your classmates or someone who do not understand your stuff that much, if they can get a sense, then that's a good talk. If they totally lost it 5 minutes into it, I think they're gonna look at their cell phone and do some other things, and then they defeat the purpose. I mean, that's just something I want to share.
Okay, so we have a question from Helena. Her question is, if a student studies biology and ends up not getting into an advanced program like a PhD or MD, what is the possible career jobs?
Oh, that's totally fine. I feel like if I were growing up here, I probably gonna take a job first. So they can go to, they can do a lot of things. They can go to pharmaceutical companies, even to the lab. That's one choice. And then they can doing some interns, or they can, I think I think labs is most of the choices, and they can go to like, sometimes people go to even supply chains or things like that, or I do, so because I'm in R&D, so I know more about R&D. A lot of our operational colleagues, like they're running the trials, they interfacing with the sites, means like the physicians who have patients to enroll into our study. Most of them do not have advanced degrees. But to compensate for that, you need to be a very good communicator and assertive, because you need to run that trial. It's not an easy job. That type of work needs to interface with the internal colleagues like me, and then they need to interface with people in different countries, all the sites, right? And then they need to interface with other functions like drug supply people, or so there's a lot of communication, very tangled. So that needs a very clear mind when you do that. But certainly there's options to do that. And also you can also, after work for a couple of years, maybe you want to go into law, or you want to get an MBA and get into commercial side. There's totally a lot of examples like that. So you don't really need to get PhD. I think PhD is more for people who wants to do rocket science, sort of saying, like you want to answer some questions, and sometimes these questions is so hard, it takes decades to answer. And then you need to enjoy writing grant, means like you go to NIH, all these government agencies ask for money. So you need to have a good writing skills, good presentation skills to present your proposals. And then you need to have the patience to work with the younger generation. You have PhDs, you have postdoc, and you have all kinds of young students and maybe undergrads to work in your lab. So you need to run the whole show. It's almost like a small company. So that's the type of work.
Yeah, so like there seems to be like a lot of leadership involved in these types
Yes.
of jobs. Yeah. So we have another question from Michelle. Her question is, how do you find a mentor?
Wow, that's $1 million question, right? So I think if someone reminded me back then, I would pay attention. I probably gonna scan through all the professors in my department or related department. Like I was in biology department. There's so many professors, and then I also take the same class with the chemistry major. So all the chemistry department, and then you just have to think. I don't know. There's no recipe for that. You may want to understand what each professors are doing. Is there anything there that potentially in the future you want to get more into? Or sometimes nowadays there's a lot of interface, different cross field kind of majors, not purely biochemistry. It can be biochemistry plus nanotechnology, or computer science from with biology. So these type of professors you can all investigate once you go to the college, and start earlier. You can test. You may not like the lab. It's not like you have a contract. You can choose. You can say, I'll for some time here, and maybe I test something else there. Maybe I have 3 options. So everything you can explore. And I have seen people, when I was in school in US, some people did their master degree at the same time with the undergrads. So undergrads like 4 years, they did 5 years. So if you do BSMS, then she went to the PhD MD program. But you don't have to do that, but the reason she can do that is that she started very early. She identified the lab, and she identified a good professor who's not only the programs are very interesting, but this person is very supportive. I think you need to pay attention to that person's personality and character and track record as well. You need to work with someone who's very supportive. Is super important for younger people early in your career.
Yeah, I agree. So we also have another question. The question is, how do you find a mentor in the workforce? Is it appropriate to ask your boss to be your mentor?
Totally. If you undergrads, you graduated from your school and going to a place, even as interns, ask never be afraid to ask, because you have nothing to lose. But of course, you have to carry yourself, ask in the right way, right? So you practice. You can practice, lock yourself up in the bathroom, in the mirror, talk or give presentations, look like, or you can record the whole thing, see whether you like it. Anywhere you want to tweak, or maybe ask your parents, someone you trust, to see the way you ask, whether that makes sense. It's perceived well. But always you can ask, really. I think a lot of people, including myself, I'm really passionate about helping younger generation. I think anyone asks me, I would give if I can help. I'm so happy to help.
Yeah, so that's about it. If you have any further questions, please type in the chat. Otherwise, I think we can end it off here. Thank you, Ms. Wang, for being the speaker. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I hope everyone has a good rest of their day.
Thank you, Anthony. It's my pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone.